Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a really candid interview with former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott. We're going to look at his sharp views on global alliances, his controversial stance on energy, and what he thinks it all means for the future of his own political party.
All right, let's just get right into it. This quote from Abbott, wow, it really sets the stage for his whole argument, doesn't it? It's all about foreign policy and, where he thinks Australia fits into the grand scheme of things. So, his first big point, it's all about President Trump's call for allies to help secure the Strait of Hormuz. And as you know, that's one of the most critical shipping lanes for oil on the entire planet. And, Abbott is super direct about this. He basically says, look, I get it. Criticism from a U.S. president isn't exactly comfortable. But he thinks Trump has a point, that allies like Australia really do need to step up and pull their own weight. Okay, so this raises a really interesting question, right? If the U.S. is the one making the call to action, why on earth does Abbott think Australia's stake in this is actually higher? Well, for him, the whole thing boils down to just one word: energy. And you can see his logic laid out right here. His main point is pretty simple. The United States, it's pretty much energy independent now. It doesn't really need Middle Eastern fuel anymore. But Australia and Europe, oh, they absolutely do. So for them, keeping that shipping lane secure isn't just a favor to an ally, it's a direct national interest. But he doesn't just stop at the theory. Nope. He goes on to directly criticize what he calls inaction from the current Australian government. He's saying that both the military chiefs and the political leaders just dropped the ball. They didn't reach out to the Americans, and because of that, they missed a huge opportunity to make a real difference. And this is where things get really interesting, because this leads us right into his second major theme. He connects all these international tensions directly to what's happening back home with Australia's own energy policy. So someone asked Abbott what he thought about the current Prime Minister's big national address on fuel security. And his review, well, let's just say it was blunt, deeply underwhelming. He basically felt it was all talk and no substance, especially for such a critical issue. See, for Abbott, it comes down to a really simple principle. Energy security is national security. You just can't separate the two. He's arguing that a country's ability to power itself is directly tied to how resilient it can be in a world that's, pretty volatile. So he lays out this clear contrast, right? On one side, you've got what he calls the government's approach, a lot of hand-wringing and just doubling down on the green energy transition. And on his side, he proposes what he sees as practical solutions, things like building more fuel storage facilities and making sure Australia has affordable, reliable fossil fuel power. And wow, he really doesn't hold back when it comes to the whole net zero emissions push. I mean, he uses some incredibly strong language here. He calls it economic suicide. So in his view, this isn't just a bad policy, it's an act of actively harming the country's economy. All right, so from these huge, big picture ideas, Abbott then brings it all right back down to earth. He shifts his focus to the nitty-gritty, the internal politics of his own party, the Liberals. The conversation takes a turn here, and it gets into a pretty controversial internal party squabble. It's all about a politician named Moira Deeming. But for Abbott, this isn't just about one person. Her case is really a symbol of a much bigger fight, a battle for the very soul of the party. He basically holds her up as a committed liberal. His argument is, look, if the party can't find a place for someone like her, someone who he feels represents a core part of their voter base, then something is very, very wrong with the party itself. So you have to ask, what's the real risk here? What does Abbott think will actually happen if the party ends up pushing away this whole segment of its space? And his warning is pretty stark. He says these voters aren't just going to stay home on election day. No, they're going to actively go and vote for rival parties, like One Nation. So for him, this isn't just about some internal disagreement. This is about the party's actual survival. Okay, so let's pull all these different threads together. We're going to do a quick recap of the three main arguments Tony Abbott makes in this interview. And you can really see here how his whole worldview connects, right? It all starts with foreign policy, this idea that Australia needs to be more assertive. That connects directly to energy security and his argument for fossil fuels. And then he ties it all back to this internal battle over the Liberal Party's very identity. It's all linked. So at the end of the day, Abbott's comments aren't really just about what's happened in the past. This is him, right now, weighing in on a huge debate about the future of conservative politics in Australia. And it really leaves you with a big question. doesn't it? What is that future actually going to look like?